The life of Abram, part 1. It was in that night that Abram was born, that all the servants of Terah, Abram's father, and all the wise men of Nimrod and his conjurers came and ate and drank in the house of Terah, and they rejoiced with him on that night. When all the wise men and conjurers went out of the house of Terah, they lifted up their eyes toward heaven that night to look at the stars, and they saw one very large star come from the east and ran in the heavens. He swallowed up 4 stars from the 4 sides of the heavens. All the wise men of the king and conjurers were astonished at the sight and knew its import.
This only betokens the child that has been born to Terah this night, who will grow up and be fruitful and multiply and possess all the earth, he and his children forever, and he and his seed will slay great kings and inherit their lands.
The wise men and conjurers went home that night, and in the morning assembled together.
Behold, the sight that we saw last night is hidden from the king. It has not been made known unto him. And should this thing get known to the king in the latter days, he will say to us, why have you concealed this matter from me? And then we shall suffer death. Therefore, now let us go and tell the king the sight which we saw and the interpretation thereof, and we shall then remain clear.
And they did so. And they all went to the king and bowed down to him.
May the king live!
My king, we heard that a son was born to Terah, the son of Nahor, the prince of thy host. And we yesterday night came to his house, and we ate and drank and rejoiced with him that night.
And when thy servants went out from the house of Terah to go to our homes to abide there for the night, we lifted up our eyes to heaven, and we saw a great star coming from the east. And the same star ran with great speed and swallowed up 4 great stars from the 4 sides of heaven.
And thy servants were astonished at the sight which we saw, and were greatly terrified. And we made our judgment upon the sight, and knew by our wisdom the proper interpretation thereof, that this applies to a child that is born unto Terah, who will grow up and multiply greatly, and become powerful, and kill all the kings of the earth, and inherit all their lands, he and his seed forever.
And now, our Lord and King, behold, we have truly acquainted thee with what we have seen concerning this child. If it seemeth good to the king to give his father value for this child, we will slay him before he shall grow up and increase in the land, and his evil increase against us, that we and our children perish through this evil.
And the king heard their words, and they seemed good in his sight. And he sent and called for Terah.
I have been told that a son was yesterday born to thee, and after this manner was observed in the heavens at his birth. Now therefore give me the child, that we may slay him before his evil springs up against us. And I will give thee for his value thy house full of silver and gold.
My lord and king, I have heard thy words, and thy servant shall do all that his king desireth. But my lord and king, I will tell thee what happened to me yesternight, that I may see what advice the king will give his servant. And then I will answer the king upon what he has just spoken.
Terah said to the king, Ion, son of Mored, came to me yesternight, saying, Give unto me the great and beautiful horse that the king gave thee, and I will give thee silver and gold and straw and provender for its value. And the king heard the words of Terah, and his anger was kindled, and he considered him in the light of a fool.
Art thou so silly, ignorant, or deficient in understanding to do this thing, to give thy beautiful horse for silver and gold, or even straw or provender? Art thou short of silver and gold, that thou shouldn't do this thing because thou canst not obtain straw and provender to feed thy horse? And what is silver and gold to thee, or straw and provender, that thou shouldn't give away that fine horse which I gave thee, like which there is no to be had on this whole earth?
Like unto this, has the king spoken to his servant? I beseech thee, my lord and king, what is this which thou didst say unto me, saying, Give thy son, that we may slay him, and I will give thee silver and gold for his value? What shall I do with silver and gold after the death of my son? Who shall inherit me? Surely then, at my death, it will return to my king who gave it.
I will purchase thy younger son for a price.
Let my king give me 3 days till I consider this matter within myself and consult with my family concerning the words of my king.
Terah went out from the king's presence, and he came home to his family and spoke to them all the words of the king, and the people were greatly afraid. And it was in the 3rd day that the king sent for Terah.
Send me thy son for a price, as I spoke to thee. Shouldest thou not do this? I will send and slay all thou hast in thy house, so that thou shalt not even have a dog remaining.
Terah hastened, as the thing was urgent from the king, and he took a child from one of his servants which his handmaid had borne to him that day. And Terah brought to the king and received value for him.
And the Lord was with Terah in this matter, that Nimrod might not cause Abram's death. And the king took the child from Terah, and with all his might dashed his head to the ground, for he thought it had been Abram. And this was concealed from him from that day, and it was forgotten by the king, as it was the will of providence not to suffer Abram's death.
Terah took Abram his son secretly together with his mother and nurse. He concealed them in a cave and brought them their provisions monthly. The Lord was with Abram in the cave, and he grew up, and Abram was in the cave 10 years. And the king and his princes, soothsayers and sages, thought the king had killed Abram. In the 10th year of the life of Abram, his mother and nurse went out from the cave, as the king and his subjects had forgotten the affair of Abram. When Abram came out of the cave, he went to Noah and his son Shem, and he remained there with them to learn the instruction of the Lord and his ways. And no man knew where Abram was. And Abram served Noah and Shem, his son, for a long time. And Abram was in Noah's house 39 years. And Abram knew the Lord from 3 years old. And he went in the ways of the Lord unto the day of his death, and as Noah and his son Shem taught him. And all the sons of the earth in those days greatly transgressed the Lord, and they rebelled against him, and they served other gods, and they forgot the Lord who had created them in the earth. And the king and all his servants and Terah with all his household were then the first of those that served gods of wood and stone. Terah had 12 gods of large size, made of wood and stone, after the 12 months of the year, and he served each one monthly. And every month Terah would bring his meat offering and drink offering to his gods. Thus did Terah all the days. And Abram, the son of Terah, was waxing great in those days in the house of Noah, and no man knew it, and the Lord was with him. And the Lord gave Abram an understanding heart, and he knew all the works of that generation were vain, and that all their gods were vain and were of no avail. And Abram saw the sun shining upon the earth, and Abram said unto himself,
Surely now this sun that shines upon the earth is God, and him will I serve.
And Abram served the sun in that day, and he prayed to him. And when evening came, the sun set as usual. And Abram said within himself,
Surely this cannot be God. Who is he who made the heavens and the earth, who created upon earth? Where is he?
The night darkened over him, and he lifted up his eyes toward the west, north, south, and east, and he saw that the sun had vanished from the earth, and the day became dark. And Abram saw the stars and moon before him.
Surely this is the God who created the whole earth as well as man. And behold, these his servants are gods around him.
Abram served the moon and prayed to it all that night. And in the morning when it was light, and the sun shone upon the earth as usual, Abram saw all the things that the Lord God had made upon earth. And Abram said unto himself,
Surely these are not gods that made the earth and all mankind, but these are the servants of God.
Abram remained in the house of Noah, and there knew the Lord and his ways, and he served the Lord all the days of his life. And in the 50th year of the life of Abram, son of Terah, Abram came forth from the house of Noah, and went to his father's house. And Abram knew the Lord, and he went in his ways and instructions, and the Lord his God was with him. Terah his father was in those days still captain of the host of King Nimrod, and he still followed strange gods. And Abram came to his father's house, and saw 12 gods standing there in their temples, and the anger of Abram was kindled, when he saw these images in his father's house.
As the Lord liveth, these images shall not remain in my father's house. So shall the Lord who created me do unto me, if in these 3 days' time I do not break them all.
Abram went from them, and his anger burned within him. And Abram hastened and went from the chamber to his father's outer court. And he found his father sitting in the court, and all his servants with him. And Abram came and sat before him.
Father, tell me, where is God who created heaven and earth, and all the sons of men upon earth? And who created thee and me?
Behold, those who created us are all with us in the house.
My Lord, show them to me, I pray thee.
And Terah brought Abram into the chamber of the inner court, and Abram saw, and behold, the whole room was full of gods of wood and stone, 12 great images, and others less than they without number.
Behold, these are they which made all thou seest upon earth, and which created me, and thee, and all mankind.
When Abram had gone from the wood and stone gods, he went to his mother and sat before her.
Behold, my father has shown me those who made heaven and earth, and all the sons of men. Now therefore, hasten and fetch a kid from the flock, and make it of it savoury meat, that I may bring it to my father's gods, as an offering for them to eat. Perhaps I may thereby become acceptable to them.
And his mother did so, and she fetched a kid, and made savoury meat thereof, and brought it to Abram. Abram took the savoury meat from his mother, and brought it before his father's gods, and he drew nigh to them that they might eat. And Terah his father did not know of it. And Abram saw on the day when he was sitting amongst them, that they had no voice, no hearing, no motion, and not one of them could stretch forth his hand to eat. Abram mocked them.
Surely the savoury meat that I prepared does not please them, or perhaps it was too little for them, or for that reason they would not eat. Therefore tomorrow I will prepare fresh savoury meat, better and more plentiful than this, in order that I may see the result.
It was on the next day that Abram directed his mother concerning the savoury meat. And his mother rose and fetched 3 fine kids from the flock, and she made of them some excellent savoury meat, such as her son was fond of. And she gave it to her son Abram, and Terah his father did not know of it. And Abram took the savoury meat from his mother, and brought it before his father's gods into the chamber. And he came nigh unto them that they might eat. And he placed it before them. And Abram sat before them all day, thinking perhaps they might eat. And Abram viewed them, and behold, they had neither voice nor hearing, nor did one of them stretch forth his hand to the meat to eat. In the evening of that day in that house, Abram was clothed with the Spirit of God.
Woe unto my father and this wicked generation, whose hearts are all inclined to vanity, who serve these idols of wood and stone, which can neither eat, smell, hear, nor speak, who have mouths without speech, eyes without sight, ears without hearing, hands without feeling, and legs which cannot move.
And when Abram saw all these things, his anger was kindled against his father, and he hastened and took a hatchet in his hand, and came unto the chamber of the gods, and he broke all his father's gods. And when he had done breaking the images, he placed the hatchet in the hand of the great God which was there before them, and he went out. Terah, having heard the noise of the hatchet in the room of images, ran to the room to the images, and he met Abram going out. And Terah entered the room and found all the idols fallen down and broken. And when Terah saw this, his anger was greatly kindled, and he hastened and went from the room to Abram. And he found Abram his son still sitting in the house.
What is this work thou hast done to my gods?
Not so, my lord, for I brought savoury meat before them. And when I came nigh to them, with the meat that they might eat, they all at once stretched forth their hands to eat before the great one had put forth his hand to eat. And the large one saw their works that they did before him, and his anger was violently kindled against them. And he went and took the hatchet that was in the house, and came to them, and broke them all. And behold, the hatchet is yet in his hand, as thou seest.
Terah's anger was kindled against Abram.
What is this tale that thou hast told? Thou speakest lies to me. Is there in these gods spirit, soul, or power to do all thou hast told me? Are they not wood and stone? And have I not myself made them? And canst thou speak such lies, saying that the large God that was with them smote them? It is thou that didst place the hatchet in his hands, and then sayest he smote them all up.
And how canst thou then serve these idols in whom there is no power to do anything? Can those idols which thou trustest deliver thee? Can they hear thy prayers when thou callest upon them? Can they deliver thee from the hands of thy enemies? Or will they fight thy battles for thee against thy enemies, that thou shouldest serve wood and stone, which can neither speak nor hear? Surely it is not good for thee, nor for thy sons of men that are connected with thee. For to do these things, are you so silly, so foolish, or so short of understanding, that you will serve wood and stone, and do after this manner? And forget the Lord God, who made heaven and earth, who created you in earth, and thereby bring a great evil upon your souls, in this manner by serving wood and stone. Did not our fathers in the days of old sin in this matter? And the Lord God of the universe brought the waters of the flood upon them and destroyed the whole earth? And how can you continue to do this, and serve gods of wood and stone, who cannot hear, or speak, or deliver you from oppression, thereby bringing down the anger of the God of the universe upon you? Now therefore, my father, refrain from this, and bring not evil upon thy soul, and the souls of thy household.
And Abram hastened and sprang from before his father, and took the hatchet from his father's largest idol, with which Abram broke it and ran away. And Terah, seeing all that Abram had done, hastened to go from his house, and he went to the king, and he came before Nimrod, and stood before him, and he bowed down to the king.
What doest thou want?
I beseech thee, my lord, to hear me. Now 50 years back, a child was born to me, and thus he had done to my gods, and thus has he spoken. And now therefore, my lord and king, send for him, that he may come before thee, and judge him according to the law, that we may be delivered from this evil.
And the king sent 3 men of his servants, and they went and brought Abram before the king. And Nimrod and all his princes and servants were that day sitting before him, and Terah sat also before them.
What is this that thou hast done to thy father and to his gods?
The large God that was with them in the house did to them what thou hast heard.
Had they power to speak and eat and do as thou hast said?
And if there be no power in them, why dost thou serve them and cause thy sons of men to err through thy follies? Doest thou imagine that they can deliver thee or do anything small or great, that thou shouldest serve them? And why wilt thou not sense the God of the whole universe, who created thee, and in whose power it is to kill and keep alive? O foolish and simple and ignorant king, Woe unto thee forever.
And when Abram had ceased speaking before the king and princes, Abram lifted up his eyes to the heavens.
The Lord seeketh all the wicked, and he will judge them.
And when the king heard the words of Abram, he ordered him to be put into prison. And Abram was 10 days in prison. And at the end of those days, the king ordered that all the kings, princes, and governors of different provinces and sages should come before him. And they sat before him, and Abram was still in the house of confinement.
Have you heard what Abram, the son of Terah, has done to his father? Thus has he done to him. I ordered him to be brought before me, and thus has he spoken his heart and did not misgive him, neither did this stir in my presence. And behold, now he is confined in prison. And therefore decide what judgment is due to this man, who reviled the king, and spoke and did all the things that you heard.
My lord, the man who revileth the king should be hanged upon a tree. But having done all the things that he said, and having despised our gods, he must therefore be burned to death. For this is the law in this matter.
If it pleaseth the king to do this, let him order his servants to kindle a fire both night and day in thy brick furnace, and then we will cast this man into it.
The king did so, and he commanded his servants that they should prepare a fire for 3 days and 3 nights in the king's furnace, that is in Kasdim. And the king ordered them to take Abram from prison and bring him out to be burned. And all the king's servants, princes, lords, governors, and judges, and all the inhabitants of the land, about 900,000 men, stood opposite the furnace to see Abram. And when Abram was come, the conjurers of the king and sages saw Abram, and they cried out to the king,
Our sovereign lord, surely this is the man whom we know to have been the child at whose birth the great star swallowed the 4 stars, which we declared to the king now 50 years since. Behold, now his father has also transgressed thy commandments, and mocked thee by bringing thee another child, which thou didst kill.
When the king heard their words, he was exceedingly wroth, and he ordered Terah to be brought before him.
Hast thou heard what the conjurers have spoken? Now tell me truly, how didst thou? And if thou shalt speak truth, thou shalt be acquitted.
My lord and king, thou hast heard the truth, and what the sages have spoken is right.
How couldst thou do this thing, to transgress my orders, and to give me a child that thou didst not begat, and to take value for him?
Because my tender feelings were excited for my son at that time, and I took a son of my handmaid, and I brought him to the king.
Advise thee to this. Tell me, do not hide aught from me, and then thou shalt not die.
It was Haran, my eldest son, who advised me to do this. And Haran was in those days that Abram was born, 32 years old.
But Haran did not advise his father to anything, for Terah said this thing to the king in order to deliver his soul from the king.
Haran thy son, who advised thee to this, shall die through fire with Abram. For the sentence of death is upon him for having rebelled against the king's desire in doing this thing.
And Haran at that time felt inclined to follow the ways of Abram, but kept it within himself. And Haran said in his heart,
Behold, now the king has seized Abram on account of these things which Abram did. And it shall come to pass that if Abram prevail over the king, I will follow him. But if the king prevail, I will go after the king.
And when Terah had spoken this thing to the king concerning Haran his son, the king ordered Haran to be seized with Abram, and they brought them both, Abram and Haran his brother, to cast them into the fire. And the king's servants took Abram and his brother, and they stripped them of all their clothes except in their lower garments which were upon them, bound their hands and feet with linen cords, and the servants of the king lifted them up and cast them both into the furnace. And the Lord loved Abram, and he had compassion over him. And the Lord came down and delivered Abram from the fire, and he was not burned. But all the cords with which they bound him were burned, while Abram remained and walked about in the fire. And Haran died when they had cast him into the fire, and he was burned to ashes, for his heart was not perfect with the Lord. Those men who cast him into the fire, the flame of the fire spread over them, and they were burned. And 12 men of them died. And Abram walked in the midst of the fire 3 days and 3 nights. And all the servants of the king saw him walking in the fire, and they came and told the king,
Behold, we have seen Abram walking about in the midst of the fire. Even of the lower parts of his garments which were upon him are not burned, but of the cords in which you are bound are burned.
And when the king heard their words, his heart fainted, and he would not believe them. So he sent other faithful princes to see this matter, and they went and saw it and told it to the king. The king rose to go and see it, and he saw Abram walking to and fro in the midst of the fire, and he saw Haran's body burned. And the king wondered greatly. And the king ordered Abram to be taken out from the fire, and his servants approached to take him out, and they could not, for the fire was round about, and the flame ascending toward them from the furnace. And the king's servants fled from it, and the king rebuked them.
Make haste and bring Abram out of the fire, that you should not die.
And the servants of the king again approached to bring Abram out, and the flames came upon them and burned their faces, so that 8 of them died. And when the king saw that his servants could not approach the fire, lest they should be burned, the king called to Abram,
O servant of God who is in heaven, go forth from amidst the fire, and come hither before me.
And Abram hearkened to the voice of the king, and he went forth from the fire and came and stood before the king.
How is it that thou wast not burnt in the fire?
Haran was 82 years old when he died in the fire of Kasdim. And the king, princes, and inhabitants of the land, seeing that Abram was delivered from the fire, they came and bowed down to Abram.
Do not bow down to me, but bow down to the God of the world who made you, and serve him, and go in his ways. For it is he who delivered me from out of this fire, and it is he who created the souls and spirits of all men, and formed man in his mother's womb, and brought him forth into the world. And it is he who will deliver those who trust in him from all pain.
And this thing seemed very wonderful in the eyes of the king and princes, that Abram was saved from the fire, and that Haran was burned. And the king gave Abram many presents, and he gave him his 2 head servants from the king's house. The name of one was Onai, and the name of the other was Eliezer. Abram went forth from the king in peace, and many of the king's servants followed him, and about 300 men joined him. And Abram returned on that day and went to his father's house, he and the men that followed him. And Abram served the Lord his God all the days of his life, and he walked in his ways and followed his law. And from that day forward, Abram inclined the hearts of the sons of men to serve the Lord. And at that time, Abram took unto himself a wife, the daughter of his brother Haran. The name of Abram's wife was Sarai.